Welcome back to ADD, Abooze Deep Dive, where we go completely beyond the music. We don't just talk about the charts or the streams here. We dissect the real, often painful stories behind the rise, the silent struggles, and the absolute truth about the artist's journey. I'm your host, Tony.
And I'm your resident music industry analyst. And today, we are diving into something every independent artist and honestly every dreamer can relate to on a deeply uncomfortable level.
Yeah, because we were asking this scary question. What happens when your raw talent simply isn't enough anymore? And, the sheer weight of your own relentless ambition actually starts breaking your mind and your body down.
It is the most terrifying question a creator can face, honestly. Like, what do you do when the dream starts eating you alive?
Right. And if you are sitting in your car right now, or maybe you're lying awake at 3 a.m, questioning if your own sacrifices are actually worth the toll they are taking, I really want you to pull up a chair. Hit that subscribe button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and officially join the ADD community.
Because we are building a space here that actually talks about the terrifying reality of the grind, not just the filtered highlight reel.
The highlight reel is the enemy of truth, and tearing it down is our entire mission for this deep dive. Today, we are putting Abooze's incredibly vulnerable, frankly, devastating track, Will I Be Fine, under the microscope.
We are going way beyond the production value today. The goal here is to really map out the psychological and emotional journey embedded in these lyrics.
Yeah, we're tracing that massive shift from rock bottom, suffocating desperation to this profound spiritual self-assurance, and figuring out what this roadmap means for you or really anyone currently fighting for their lives in the independent space.
And when we say fighting for your life, I mean, that is not a metaphor here.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Abooze does not give you a gentle runway into this track. There is no soft acoustic intro preparing you for the emotional weight. He just drops you right into the epicenter of an active, ongoing mental crisis.
It really hits like a panic attack right out of the gate.
It does. The very first lines of verse 1, he sings, so many times, I've been down, but I keep pushing hard. Will I be fine? Will I be fine? Ask myself, because the thing is getting bad.
You know what stands out to me there? We really need to pause and look at the mechanical structure of those opening lines.
Yeah.
Because that lyrical looping, it's not just a stylistic choice.
Right.
It is a clinical reflection of a mind in distress. Notice the repetition so many times. And then that frantic questioning, will I be fine? Will I be fine?
So it's obsessive.
Exactly. When we look at this through the lens of cognitive psychology, that kind of repetition is a hallmark of cognitive overload. It's rumination. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for logical planning and seeing the future, it has essentially been hijacked by the amygdala.
The fear center.
Yes, the fear center. The brain literally cannot find an off switch. It mimics a racing, anxious mind trying desperately to solve an unsolvable problem.
Wow. Think about the times you've been pushed to your absolute physical or mental limit. When you are standing in your kitchen at midnight, completely overwhelmed, you do not speak to yourself in beautifully crafted poetic paragraphs.
No, nobody does.
You don't rationalize, you loop. You mutter the same exact phrase over and over, pacing the floor, because your neural pathways are just stuck in this groove of pure anxiety.
It is a systemic short circuit. Because when you are an independent artist today, you aren't just writing songs. You are operating a multi-tier business without a safety net.
Oh, absolutely. You're the CEO, the marketing department, everything.
Right. So your brain is simultaneously managing a dozen existential threats. Like, how am I funding the next studio session? Why did the algorithm completely bury my last release?
How do I pay rent next week if this gig falls through?
Am I too old? Am I too late? That looping question, will I be fine, isn't a rhetorical musing for the sake of a catchy song. It is a desperate, urgent systems check.
A systems check, I like that.
The artist is essentially taking their own mental pulse to see if they are still functioning.
And the gravity of that pulse check hits so much harder when you hear the friction between his internal effort and his external reality.
Mm.
because he immediately follows up with, and I don't try, and I don't try, I don't cry, I fight for my life.
The sheer exertion there is so heavy.
The absolute draining of his internal reserves is palpable in those words. But then the external world just crashes right into that effort with the line, cause the thing is getting bad.
That specific friction you just mentioned, that is the exact crucible that breaks most dreamers.
Yeah.
Because we are all force-fed this pervasive, deeply Americanized cultural myth from childhood, right? The idea that if you just work hard enough, you will eventually succeed.
The ultimate hustle culture lie.
It is the foundational doctrine of modern hustle culture. It implies this strict mathematical formula where effort always equals reward. But Abooze is confronting the terrifying reality that the math does not always math.
Yeah, it rarely does in the music industry.
Right. He is putting in maximum internal effort. He is trying. He is crying. He is literally fighting for his life. And the external result is that things are actually deteriorating. The situation is still getting worse.
Listening to that contrast, it makes me think of a very specific, terrifying scenario. This verse is exactly like watching someone treading water in the middle of a pitch black, freezing ocean.
Oh, that's a bleak image.
But it's true, right? You are kicking your legs with everything you have. You are waving your arms. You are burning an astronomical amount of caloric and emotional energy, literally fighting for your life against the current.
Just to stay afloat.
Exactly. But the tragedy is, you aren't actually swimming toward a shoreline. You aren't making any forward progress. You're just expending all of your strengths to keep your nose above the surface so you don't swallow water and drown. The effort is maximum, but the trajectory is entirely stagnant.
Let me challenge the framing of that analogy for a second, though, because I think there's a duality here we need to really unpack.
Okay, I'm listening.
When we observe that relentless treading, the repetition of I don't try, are we entirely sure we are looking at a breakdown?
What else would it be?
Well, couldn't we argue that this looping is the ultimate evidence of an artist's unyielding grit? Think about a marathon runner. They loop the exact same mechanical motion for 26 miles just to survive the race. Is it possible this repetition is a flex of immense psychological endurance rather than an engine sputtering out?
I see the logic there, but honestly, I have to firmly push back on that. Grit requires a horizon line.
A horizon line.
Yeah, when you are exhibiting resilience, you have a plan, or at least a vague sense of forward momentum. You are moving towards something. The marathon runner knows where the finish line is. But when you are standing in an empty room, staring at the wall, and just repeating the phrase, "Will I be fine?" into the void, that isn't resilience anymore.
That's a really fair point.
That is survival mode, stripped of all strategy. That is checking to see if your own psychological foundation is cracked yet.
See, here's the real issue with that void you're talking about. It's the realization that merit and hard work offer absolutely zero guarantees of survival.
None. Zero.
And for you listening right now, I mean, how many times have you sat in your car after an 80-hour work week, looking at your declining bank account, looking at your stalled metrics, and felt that exact ice water in your veins?
You did everything right.
You outworked everyone. And the thing is still getting bad. That is the universal terror Abooze is tapping into. The terror of the void.
But the reality of treading water in a freezing ocean is that you can only do it for so long before your biology betrays you. Muscle fatigue is inevitable.
It always is. You can't outwill physiology.
Right. The mental exhaustion of staring into that void eventually bleeds out of the brain and violently invades the physical body. And that physiological limit is exactly what forces the perspective shift in the semi-chorus.
It moves from the head to the body.
Yes, the focus moves from the frantic mind directly into the tissue and bone. He sings, "This pain is getting deep, oh, my whole heart is hurt and grief, oh. I did push hard, but my flesh is weak, oh."
What we're witnessing here is the somatic manifestation of severe psychological stress.
It's not just in his head anymore.
No, the anxiety is no longer just a cognitive abstraction. It has taken up residence in the deep tissue. We have to look at the biology of what happens when you live in a constant state of fight or flight.
Which is basically the baseline state for most independent creators.
Absolutely. When an independent artist is operating under perpetual existential threat, financial ruin, public failure, artistic rejection, their endocrine system is constantly flooding the body with cortisol and adrenaline.
Just marinating in stress hormones.
Over time, that toxicity suppresses the immune system. It causes systemic inflammation. It disrupts sleep cycles. The pain literally gets deep. The grief actually physically aches in the cardiac muscle.
Wow. That line, "my flesh is weak," is where I actually had to pause the track the first time I heard it. Because we operate in a music culture, especially within hip-hop, Afrobeats, and modern pop, that religiously preaches invincibility.
Completely. It's all about the flex.
Right. The prevailing narrative is no days off, sleep when you're dead, outgrind the competition. And in the middle of all that posturing, Abooze does something radically, almost uncomfortably vulnerable. He admits physical defeat.
He confesses to human biological limitation.
Exactly.
And that is a deeply subversive act of songwriting. To stand up to a microphone in a genre where flexing your endless endurance and your wealth is practically the barrier to entry, and to instead declare, "my flesh is weak," it strips away every single piece of armor.
It's raw.
He is refusing to play the character of the indestructible artist. He is showing you the bruised machinery underneath.
Which raises a really dark question about the industry itself, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, we applaud artists for being authentic, but do we actually weaponize their ambition against them?
That's a heavy question.
But think about it. Does this modern hustle culture intentionally destroy independent artists before they ever reach the finish line? We celebrate the grind, but it feels like we are just cheering people on while they slowly self-immolate for our entertainment.
Honestly, that's what makes this so difficult to talk about, because that is the uncomfortable truth the industry infrastructure entirely relies upon, but utterly refuses to acknowledge.
They don't want to see the burnout. They just want the product.
We demand raw, bleeding emotion from creators, but we simultaneously demand the constant, frictionless output of a machine. The algorithm requires a new track, a new video, a new viral moment every single week.
It never stops eating.
But human biology cannot sustain continuous trauma and continuous content creation. The body keeps the score. When you are acting as your own producer, your own PR agency, your own booking manager, and absorbing every rejection personally, the flesh has no choice but to break down.
But maybe there is a hidden, incredibly necessary power in finally just admitting the breakdown. Like, as long as you are pretending to be an invincible machine, you are carrying the entire weight of your failing career on your own shoulders.
You're holding up the sky.
Yeah. But the moment you look up and say, "my flesh is weak," you are finally setting the burden down. You are acknowledging that you are not a god.
Which perfectly explains the sudden, frantic urgency of the very next lyric. He says, "Will I be tell me quick."
Tell me quick.
He isn't just asking for gentle reassurance anymore. He is demanding an immediate intervention because he is out of time. The biological clock on his physical endurance has hit 0.
He needs an answer right now.
The phrase "tell me quick" is a distress flare. It means if I do not get an answer right this second, my lungs are filling with water and I am going under.
If you are listening to this right now and you are currently navigating a deeply dark period of personal or creative doubt, I really hope you hear the absolute validation in this breakdown.
Yes, please hear this.
Your emotional grief, your burnout, your creative block, these aren't just things that are all in your head. They are literal physiological forces draining your body's resources. If you feel physically weak right now, it is not because you lack discipline or drive. It is because you are a human being carrying a profoundly heavy, unsustainable load.
And this brings us to a fascinating psychological pivot in the track. Because when the human body ultimately fails, when the nervous system crashes and you realize you cannot rely on your own physical strength to save your career, what is the natural human reflex?
You have to look for a lifeboat.
You have to search for an external anchor. You have to look outside the limits of the flesh. This absolute physical depletion forces the song into the deeply spiritual, incredibly raw territory of verse 2.
The pivot into the spiritual realm is jarring, but it's inevitable. Verse 2 opens with this plea. He sings, I pray so, I pray, Jah, come hear me out. This soul is pained. You promise that you'll stay even if they leave almighty day.
The earthly support system has officially collapsed at this point in the narrative.
It's completely gone.
Look at the phrase, even if they leave. That suggests the exodus of support has either already begun or he is anticipating the inevitable abandonment.
Because in the music industry, when the hype cools down or when the money runs out, the entourage vanishes overnight.
Oh, they scatter. Faster than you can blink. And when the crowd, the fair weather friends, and the industry gatekeepers disappear, the only remaining constant is the divine promise. Almighty day. The Almighty is present. It is the ultimate distillation of isolation.
The profound loneliness in that realization is just heavy. But the imagery he uses immediately following that realization, I mean, it crosses the line from sad to genuinely disturbing.
It gets very dark.
He sings, I don't lost my mind. I don't bleed my heart till my eyes done red. I don't drink 5 Jah, the river flow from eyes.
We need to spend some time on the mechanics of that imagery because it is incredibly visceral. Bleed my heart to my eyes done red.
That's not a normal way to cry.
He is not describing a gentle cinematic crying session. He is describing weeping with such violent force, such prolonged agony, that the capillaries in the sclera of the eyes literally burst.
Wow.
He is describing a psychological breakdown using the graphic, bloody terms of physical trauma. The sorrow hasn't just saddened him, it has physically wounded him.
And then following it up with, I don't drink 5 Jah, painting this picture of consuming his own sorrow. Of being entirely swallowed by the literal river flowing from his face. It feels like a dark baptism.
A dark baptism, that's exactly what it is.
He is drowning in the grief of his own failed ambition.
But here is where we must connect the emotional weight of these words to the cultural mechanics of how they are being delivered. Notice the specific linguistic choices throughout this track.
It's a dialect.
Yes, the use of local dialect and Nigerian pidgin. Phrases like, I dey push hard, I don't try, almighty day. This is a critical artistic decision. Abooze is not delivering this existential breakdown in polished, corporate, standardized English intended for a boardroom.
Right, he's not trying to sound like a pop radio insert.
He is grounding a universal human crisis in his extremely specific local vernacular.
Why do you think that linguistic choice fundamentally changes the emotional impact of the song? Because, I mean, he could have easily translated these feelings into a more globalized pop format to reach a wider algorithm, right?
Because that choice taps directly into the historical lineage of Afrobeats and Afrofusion. If you look at the DNA of these genres going all the way back to pioneers like Fela Kuti, there is a long, rich tradition of smuggling deep sociopolitical critique and profound personal melancholy underneath incredibly infectious polyrhythmic production.
The dancing through the pain trope.
Exactly. By utilizing his native dialect, the cry for help ceases to be a generic, abstract pop lyric. It becomes rooted in a specific cultural struggle, a specific neighborhood, a specific lived reality. The pidgin English carries the texture of the streets, of the local markets, of the actual people who understand the specific flavor of the grind.
You know, it's brilliant you bring up the cultural texture because there's a massive paradox happening here. We just talked about how deeply isolated he feels, even if they leave.
Right, the abandonment.
He is painting a picture of the inherently solitary nature of the indie artist's journey. Because let's be honest, people only really rally around your dream once it starts looking profitable, right?
The old saying holds true. Success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is an orphan. The grind is solitary confinement.
But here is the paradox. By singing about this suffocating loneliness, using a localized, deeply cultural dialect, he is simultaneously wrapping his isolation in a massive sense of community.
Oh, that's fascinating.
The words he is using, the pidgin, the cadence, they belong to a collective people. So even in the very breath where he is declaring, everyone has abandoned me, the language itself connects him back to his roots, back to his ancestors, back to a shared cultural consciousness.
So he's not totally alone.
Right. He isn't entirely alone in the void because he is using the sonic bat signal of his community.
That is a powerful point. The language functions as a structural tether to community right at the exact moment the physical community has walked out the door. And it is this specific moment, this absolute rock bottom of bursting capillaries, bloody tears, divine pleas, and total physical emptiness that serves as the necessary crucible for the entire track.
Because a cup has to be completely emptied before you can pour anything new into it.
Precisely. The architectural structure of the song depends entirely on this breakdown. You cannot rebuild a psyche until the rotting foundation is entirely cleared out by the river of tears.
It has to wash away.
And that clearing out makes space for the most significant structural and emotional shift in the entire deep dive, which happens right as we hit the chorus.
Oh, the transition into the chorus is where the entire energetic frequency of the track fundamentally alters. He goes from the chaos of the verses into this, will I be fine, I'll be fine, I'll be fine.
Pay very close attention to how that shift operates structurally. We have been moving vertically downward this entire time, right?
Sinking deeper and deeper.
Sinking deeper into the dark ocean, deeper into the physical pain, deeper into the bleeding heart. But right here, the song transitions horizontally. We move instantly from the frantic, high-pitched questioning of, will I be fine, to an immediate, steady, declarative statement. I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
It is the literal auditory representation of a psychological self-soothing technique.
Yes.
If verse 1 was the onset of a devastating panic attack, this chorus is the slow, deliberate breathing exercise, bringing the heart rate back down to a resting rhythm. Inhale, exhale, I'll be fine.
Think about what you, as the listener, have just endured alongside the artist. You have been dragged through the exhaustion, the somatic pain, the shattered expectations, and the crippling isolation.
It's exhausting just to listen to.
The tension is wound so tight it's almost unbearable. And then instead of waiting for a record label executive to validate him, instead of waiting for a viral TikTok moment to prove his worth, the artist simply decides to answer his own terrifying question.
He steps in as his own savior.
He tells himself he will be fine.
But let me ask you this, because this is where the psychology gets really messy for me. When he repeats, I'll be fine, is he actually stating an objective truth? Or is he casting a spell?
What do you mean by that?
Because when I listen to the cadence of that repetition, it does not sound like a man looking at a positive bank balance and confirming he is okay. It sounds like an incantation.
Ah, I see.
It sounds like a mantra he is speaking into existence purely because the alternative, accepting that he will not be fine, is a reality too dark to survive.
You know, the boundary line between profound faith and absolute delusion is paper thin in the mind of an artist. Are you technically delusional for believing you will conquer the industry when your bank account is negative, your friends have left, and your body is shutting down?
Statistically speaking, probably yes.
From a purely statistical standpoint, yes. But for the independent creator, delusion is not a symptom of madness. It is a required tool in the survival kit.
You have to manufacture your own hope.
You have to manufacture it out of thin air when there is zero empirical data to support your optimism.
And that is the heaviest burden of all. To look at a mountain of empirical evidence screaming that you are failing, to look at the bleeding eyes and the weak flesh, and to still aggressively stare into the mirror and say, I'll be fine.
It takes a lot of nerve.
That requires a very specific, almost irrational kind of madness. But it is a madness that protects the spirit.
It is the necessary armor of the visionary. If you rely on external reality to dictate your internal state, the industry will crush you in a week.
In a day, honestly.
And what is so masterful about Abooze writing here is that this act of self-soothing doesn't just act as a temporary band-aid. As we move toward the final sections of the track, this desperate coping mechanism actually crystallizes into a permanent life philosophy.
It becomes his truth.
The song completes its metamorphosis from a traumatic diary entry into an indestructible anthem for survival.
Which carries us right into the emotional climax and the final philosophical conclusion of the song. He sings, long as I live, I'll be fine. That's the right mind. Because I believe so. With time, I'll be all right.
This right here is where the track stops being just about the music industry and becomes a universal anthem for overcoming failure. I want to zero in on the phrase, that's the right mind.
Okay, let's look at that.
By explicitly naming this the right mind, he is acknowledging the existence of the wrong mind.
Oh, the wrong mind was the entirety of verse 1.
Exactly.
The wrong mind was the looping panic, the belief that the algorithm's rejection meant personal failure, the feeling that external circumstances had the power to dictate his internal worth.
You nailed it. He has actively, consciously chosen to rewire his perspective. He has walked through the absolute fire of burnout and realized a vital truth. You cannot control the gatekeepers.
You really can't.
You cannot control which friends abandon you when things get hard. You cannot control the speed at which success arrives. He accepts that the only true metric he can rely on is time.
With time, I'll be all right.
It sounds like a surrender, but it is actually the ultimate victory.
And look at how drastically his definition of success has mutated from the first minute of the song to the last.
It's a total paradigm shift.
Early on, the panic was rooted in achieving the grand dream. The anxiety of the thing is getting bad was about his career trajectory, his relevance, his ability to break through the noise. But by the time the track fades out, the metric for success is completely stripped down to 3 terrifyingly simple words. Long as I live.
Staying alive. That is the entire victory condition. He systematically strips away the desperate need for global superstardom.
He lets it all go.
He removes the pressure for Billboard chart domination, for wealth, for industry validation. The massive emotional climax of this entire harrowing journey is not a promise of future riches. He isn't saying, I'll be rich. He just promises himself that as long as his lungs are drawing breath, he will be fine.
I think realizing that you can lower the stakes from I must be a global icon to be worthy to I just need to stay alive and I'll be all right is the greatest secret to artistic longevity.
It relieves so much pressure.
Because if your baseline requirement for being fine is simply waking up and still existing, the industry loses all its teeth. A bad streaming week cannot destroy you. A failed tour cannot destroy you.
Because they cannot take away what you haven't attached your self-worth to. By radically redefining success as mere biological and spiritual survival, Abooze has effectively bulletproofed his own mind.
Bulletproof, that is the perfect word.
He has stolen his power back from a cultural machine that literally feeds on an artist's desperation for approval.
It is such a heavy realization, but God, it is incredibly liberating. To be forced to look at your own absolute brokenness, to see your own red eyes and feel your weak flesh, and to realize that you actually survived the worst thing the world could throw at you.
And that transformation from the frantic treading water panic of the opening lines through the excruciating physical and spiritual breaking point, all the way to this serene, bulletproof acceptance, is what elevates this from a catchy track to a masterpiece of emotional storytelling.
It really is.
It is an auditory map out of the dark.
It really is a map for anyone lost in that dark ocean right now. And as we start to pull back and wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to chew on.
Something to keep you up at night.
Right. We have spent this entire time talking about the breakdown, the bleeding heart, the relentless, punishing nature of the hustle. But consider this perspective. If the most powerful, culturally resonant, and deeply human art, like this exact track, comes directly from the lowest, most agonizing moments of questioning, will I be fine? Then maybe the struggle is not an obstacle blocking the path to becoming a great artist.
Maybe the struggle actually is the path.
Yes, the pain isn't getting in the way of the art. The pain is the necessary fuel for the art. And if that is true, it begs a lingering, almost dangerous question for every creator out there.
What happens when the struggle ends?
What happens to the fire of an independent artist once they finally reach the shore, catch their breath, and realize that they really are going to be fine? Does the hunger permanently change when the survival instinct is no longer the only thing keeping the engine running?
That is the ultimate paradox of success. And it is something every single creator has to answer for themselves the moment they finally step out of the storm.
To everyone tuning in, thank you for sitting with us and walking through this heavy, beautiful, necessary journey today. If any part of this resonated with you, if you are currently treading water in the middle of your own Will I Be Fine chapter, I want you to drop a comment below.
Let us know we aren't crazy.
Share your experiences, your breakdowns, and your breakthroughs. You are not fighting in that dark ocean alone. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and stay fiercely connected with the ADD community. We see the work you're putting in, we hear your struggles, and this conversation absolutely does not end here. Until next time, keep your head above water and keep your mind right.